they decided to give a personal development about tikanga and moko. So, well, Paula, you first of all, what do you think? Isn't this just putting it back on the victim, or putting them in charge of fixing the issue rather than the staff and management taking it upon themselves to do a bit of research? What do you think?
I mean, far be it from me to wade in, really, because it's her decision, isn't it? But it seems a bit that way. Although if she's happy to take on that role, then good on her. That's incredibly generous of her in the circumstances when somebody's tried to humiliate her in that way and abuse her.
I think because I watched that 40-minute video and Atapai was genuinely impressed with the response of the owners. They sat down and she was very, very impressed that Atapai said the bar owners took her seriously about this issue and wanted to address the wrongs. What's your take on this?
Well, absolutely. As Paula said, that's totally up to her to decide whether she should or not, and good on her. Big ups to her for doing that. And my own experience on the weekend, I was down in Taranaki and we went to a cafe and Amma was with me and she's got a moko kauai, and this Pākehā woman went up to her and said to her, "Do you mind if you could explain to my granddaughter what that moko on your chin is about? And absolutely understand if you don't want to." And she was happy to explain to the granddaughter what her moko kauai was all about. And and really, now you've got a young person who won't be ignorant for the rest of their life. She will know now, and so it was great that Amma chose to do that, and it was great, and like you said, it's up to each individual, I guess. But yeah, these things should be normalised in this country of Aotearoa. Dormans, just wake up and, this is what happens, it's part of their culture and you should just let them in.
Because we've seen this a bit recently, with the Air New Zealand decision. Was it Sydney Haramaya from memory?
Yeah. And then about turn on that. If they just accept, that's part of the landscape of this country, has been before everybody else arrived, it's become normal to accept that.
I suppose the story could have turned out harsher than it was, Paula. We could have had a bar who would have doubled down and said no, but we didn't see that in this case.
Sounds like the owners, managers have behaved responsibly. But like I said before, so they should. When one of their staff has behaved in such an appalling manner, that is beholden on them to fix it.
And some say, why should it be up to Atawhai Toki to educate, the bar's patrons?
I get that, but like Feki says, if she's willing to,
that says a lot more about her than you would. That's good on her, and ups to her. Big ups to her.
It's coming up to 5 o'clock. I just wanted to get a brief response from this. We've been trying to do this for a wee while, but some of America's richest people are urging the US presidential candidates to back a wealth tax on the super rich to improve inequality in climate change. So what you've got now, just briefly, is you've got a open letter signed by wealthy elites like Facebook co-founder Chris Hughes and George Soros, Warren Buffett, saying that he's taxed a lower rate than his secretary, and they are suggesting that they should put a big tax on the super wealthy, because you could raise about $2.75 trillion over 10 years. You could solve some of the world's problems. Would you endorse or agree? If you were both a billionaire, would you sign that letter?
Yeah.
If only, but yes.
I'd want to be sure that we're going to solve the world's problems with it.
Yeah, that's right.
Not triple it.
Or
buy Mars with it.
Yeah, very good point. Wheti Taito and Paula Penfold, thank you very much for being with me today.
Thank you, Paula.
It's been great. See you.
Kei te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Tonight, a call for the Immigration Minister to resign over delays to migrant worker visas. Delays, some say, are costing forestry hundreds of thousands of dollars. And is it time to call timber on Shane Jones's billion trees target too? Let's ask him. We might not need people power in agriculture with robotic fruit pickers tagged as the future of work. Is the pen mightier than the strike? Principals protest their pay with a letter-writing campaign. A drunk motorist who ran a red light killing a taxi driver in Auckland is sent to jail. Media are banned from police gun buyback events. Why? And the first All Black squad of the year is unveiled in Auckland tonight.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora ko Susana Leao with tēnei. A significant change for victims in sexual violence cases means they may not have to appear in a courtroom at all. Fear and anxiety about court appearances prevents many women from reporting what has happened to them. Under changes announced by the government today, victims will have the right to choose whether they give their evidence in the witness box or by audio-visual link or pre-recorded video. The Parliamentary Under-Secretary to the Justice Minister, Jan Logie, says that could mean a video of a police interview could be played in court, followed by a video of the cross-examination.
This could mean not having to come to the trial at all, which can be a huge relief. It also allows the healing process to take precedence.
Jan Logie plans to introduce legislation to Parliament by the end of the year, but there's no time frame for the changes to be implemented. Aucklanders are being asked to watch their water use after a particularly dry year so far. Storage dams at the Hunua and Waitakere ranges have had about 40% less rain than normal. Rosalind Klein from Watercare says they want people to use water wisely so the city is prepared for a possibly dry summer.
We usually get quite a good recharge over winter of our dams. The forecast we've received from Met-Service is that the winter is not looking extremely wet, so we know that we're probably going to start summer with a bit less water than usual.
Rosalind Klein says there's been a big jump in people refilling private water tanks as Aucklanders in rural areas run dry. The media will be banned from attending gun buyback events to protect the privacy of people handing in banned firearms. The police are holding a media open day on Thursday, but say come the real events, journalists won't be allowed inside the collection venues. It comes after the Deerstalkers Association raised concerns that members would be vilified and have cameras thrust in their faces. The association's president, Bill O'Leary, says members had serious concerns about what would happen at a buyback event.
The police have addressed several of these issues. As far as the media is concerned, there'll be no media presence or filming allowed within the actual event centre, so that at the point when an individual is handing over the firearm, he's not going to have a camera shoved in his or her face.
Bill O'Leary says firearms owners are reluctant to hand in their weapons but want to remain lawful gun owners. The lawyer for a drunk motorist jailed after he ran a red light, killing a taxi driver in Auckland, says his client now carries his own life sentence. Fashad Bahadouri Esfihani was behind the wheel of a Mercedes when he ran a red light on Simon Street in Auckland CBD just before Christmas 2017. He smashed into the side of the Toyota Prius Abdul Sayed was driving, killing the young father, and later pleaded guilty to charges, including excess breath alcohol causing death. He's been jailed for nearly 4 years, and this morning his lawyer Mark Ryan told the court his client was genuinely remorseful.
This young man made a mistake. He's going to carry that mistake with him like a millstone around his neck for the rest of his life. Nothing he does is going to bring back the victim.
Esfahani was also ordered to pay $12,000 to Mr. Sayed's family. News that the Lord of the Rings TV series will be filmed in West Auckland has been described as fantastic by local business association. Industry insiders say pre-production work has already started in the city and Queenstown is also expected to be involved. Production is expected to last for 5 years, bringing secure employment for many of those working or connected to the screen industry. The chair of the Central Park and Henderson Business Association, Calvin Armstrong, says it's great news for the area.
Whether it's business or just local community and schools, I think it's fantastic. It's just gives that little push, a little bit of encouragement for our young and up-and-coming people to get into the workforce. It might be some great opportunities for them.
Calvin Armstrong from the Central Park and Henderson Business Association. The main state-run newspaper in China has called for a zero-tolerance approach to protests in Hong Kong after pro-democracy demonstrators stormed the territory's parliament and ransacked the building. The Beijing-based Global Times says protesters acted out of blind arrogance and rage and showed a complete disregard for law and order. However, Fernando Cheung, Vice Chair of the Labour Party and a member of the Legislative Council, says police deliberately let protesters storm the parliament to make them look bad.
They purposefully allowed the demonstrator to break into this building, to vandalize it. And I think this is a trap in that they want this type of scene to be seen by the public.
Fernando Cheung from the Legislative Council in Hong Kong. It's 5:05. While the Crusaders expected some challenges to win their third straight Super Rugby title, they didn't think they would have to do it without key All Blacks Ryan Crotty and Scott Barrett. Crotty and Barrett suffered broken hands in the semi-final win over the Hurricanes and will miss Saturday's final against the Jaguares, but also the All Blacks Rugby Championship Series. The squad for those tests is named in a couple of hours. The Crusaders assistant coach Brad Moore says Crotty and Barrett have had a major influence in getting the Crusaders to the final.
We acknowledged as a group before the final series that there'll be a core group of players that will probably take us through, but at the same time there's going to be something happen where someone else is going to have a chance, and sure enough, here it is, and we have utter faith that the whole group is working really hard for us to get a result on Saturday night.
The Crusaders' assistant coach, Brad Moore. The Silver Ferns have added defender Michaela Sokolic-Beatson to their squad to travel to the Netball World Cup in Liverpool. Sokolic-Beatson has been included as injury cover for Katrina Rore. The former captain missed the side's recent World Cup warm-up matches due to a calf injury. The squad leaves tomorrow, but coach Nolene Taurua will have to decide by next Tuesday whether Rore stays or goes. Cyclist Patrick Bevan has been named in the Polish CCC team to compete in his third Tour de France, starting in Brussels this weekend. Fellow New Zealander George Bennett will also ride the Tour for a third time as a member of the Dutch Jumbo-Visma team. That's the news.
One deal to rule them all.
Cautiously optimistic about the series, especially seeing Jeff Bezos is reportedly a huge Lord of the Rings fan.
She's a lumberjack and she's okay.
There's a lot of women out there that are looking for any type of work. Forestry's not just about cutting down trees and planting them, of course.
And it's our figure of speech, eh?
So enough already, eh?
That's the difference between us, eh? How do you like that, eh?
That's going a little bit too far there, eh?
Loud and Clear Morning Report with Susie Ferguson and Corin Dan, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, the battle in the US to make sure 9/11 first responders get the money they deserve. And after 10, filmmaker Nanfu Wang on the untold story of China's one-child policy and the generations of parents and children forever shaped by it. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. The northern half of the North Island from Taranaki and Taupo northwards, including Bay of Plenty and northern Gisborne. Often cloudy with a few showers. Rain developing in Taranaki tomorrow, heavy about the mountain. For the remainder of the North Island, mainly fine tonight. Rain developing tomorrow, heavy falls about Tararoa Ranges, clearing in Wellington in the evening. For Bulla, Nelson and Marlborough, scattered showers tonight, mainly in the ranges. Rain tomorrow with some heavy falls, easing to showers in Bulla in the afternoon and clearing elsewhere later in the day. For Westland, scattered rain becoming widespread and heavy this evening, easing to showers tomorrow afternoon, but thunderstorms possible in the south. Fiordland, rain heavy at times, thunderstorms possible tomorrow. Canterbury, fine with variable high cloud. Otago and Southland, scattered showers, possibly thundery about the south coast tomorrow evening. Chatham Islands, cloudy periods, a few showers tomorrow morning. You're with RNZ National, it's 5:08.
Thanks, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. We begin tonight's program on the East Coast. A Gisborne forestry contractor is calling for the Immigration Minister's resignation, saying delays in processing migrant worker visas is costing the industry and his disadvantaged region hundreds of thousands of dollars. Jason Koya currently employs 24 full-time workers. 10 of them are from overseas, but he's still looking for up to 40 more planters this season and says he's being stymied by unreasonable immigration wait times. Mr. Koya says he's paying top dollar at $30 a box of 100 seedlings planted, with some of his workers making $2,000 a week. But despite this and an extensive local recruitment campaign, he says he simply can't get locals to fill the jobs.
Again, we've engaged extensively with WINS and they weren't able to find any workers. We'll put in 3 requests for the Ministry of Social Development. They could not find any suitable candidates. When I mean suitable candidates, I mean the reply was 0 workers they could find for us. So basically, through advertising, through a bit of word of mouth, we were able to employ 8 locals. Unfortunately, I've had to let 6 of them go already. And
why?
Basically that's just because of low attendance. They'll start off for 4 days, then go to 3, then go to 2, then go to 1. So there's just there seems to be no will or commitment to work, unfortunately.
So when you ran this campaign, how many were you hoping to recruit?
30 to 40. At the moment, we've got about 20 boys. 10 of them are on work visas, but I still need another 20 workers. I needed another 20 workers 2 months ago when we started our planting season.
So how much is this costing you, not having those workers? What does that translate to, dollars-wise?
Well, I'll put it this way. We had to decline one forest owner upon starting planting season. That was May the 7th, and we had to turn down 400 hectares. So that's probably a gross revenue loss of 200K, somewhere around there. Having said that, our current target regime planting for this season is 2,000 hectares. Because we're probably at 40% of our labour workforce that we need, we probably won't hit that target, and we'll probably be short by a further 600 hectares. So I'd probably say well over $500,000 in gross revenue being lost.
Because you simply cannot get the people power to put these seedlings in the ground.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, I know this is a nationwide problem. I know this is a regional problem because I know of other contractors out there that have already had to turn down 500 hectares and 200 hectares. Again, in the same boat, they just can't find the workers.
You mentioned the fact you have some workers here on visas, right? So how is that going? Are you trying to get more of those people?
Oh, definitely. Our most productive workers are the guys that are on visas. I know, not only just speaking for myself, but speaking for other contractors that I've associated with over the last 10 years, I can state categorically if it wasn't for them, our business will probably be in the Googler. Migrant workers are reliable, they're honest, they're trustworthy, they're drug-free, they're alcohol-free, and they're easy to train, and they hit production target every day.
Can't local workers be that as well, Jason? Can't local workers be that as well?
There are some good local workers, but over my experience, probably the last 3 years in training, probably 95% don't last.
You would like to bring in some more overseas workers to bolster your numbers. How long is it taking you to get visas for these people?
Okay, our first applications were done mid-April. That's just almost 3 months ago. And from what I understand, nothing's going on. They're just lying there dormant overseas, the applications.
How do you know that nothing's happening with the applications?
Because there's been no responses. Usually they'll give you a response if they need further information. If there's a document that's missing before they can continue with the application and things like that. So, yeah, it's just lying there, just lying dormant, heard nothing at the moment.
So
from what I understand, it could take up to 90 days.
Okay, so you've heard nothing from Immigration New Zealand and you believe it could take up to 90 days for these visas to be, well, approved or otherwise?
Yep.
And how long are the visas for, when and if you get one?
Well, there's two visas. There's the Essential Skills Work Visa. Unfortunately, you've got to be qualified for that. You've got to have at least 1 year's experience, or you've got to have an NCQ level 2 or 3. So it's hard for us to get anyone from Tonga that has that qualification. So we've gone through another route, which is a new route from government, which was introduced in February, and that's known as a Bush Regenerator Visa. Now, this is more focused on planting. Although the visa itself is rather vague, it doesn't say 6 to 12 months, but we can get our boys over under this visa without any qualifications, and they can plant and do weed control for us, which is usually about 4 to 6 months of the season.
To put this simply, is the situation that it takes so long for you to get visas for these workers that you will not get the labour in the time that you require it?
Oh, yeah, definitely. It's 2 months late already. Our season has been seriously affected forest owners are trying to ask us if we can find more local workers. And I've just said to some of the supers, I said, "You're dreaming, mate. You're dreaming." I've had to get rid of 6 guys because they're not turning up to work every day.
So, in short, you believe it is impossible for Shane Jones to meet the 1 billion trees target?
Oh, yeah, exactly. And I can tell you there's probably contractors throughout the whole nation that will agree with me as well. It's not going to happen. I'm being realistic here. I've got enough facts and data on my payslips to show you the attendance and production records that this government's dreaming. And I told his office, when his office come down, I said, look, I know you're focused on Kiwis. I know you're focused on locals as well. So are we. We are really passionate about bringing our young Māori boys in as well, as a Māori myself, and giving them careers. But just from our experience, it's not going to happen because they don't last. So I can't see that target being hit. And I've told them, and I said, look, if you're serious about this, you really have to, as an interim, as an immediate way to address our sustainability concerns, you've really got to allow focus on a more streamlined forestry visa.
In terms of the workers, have you spoken to the Immigration Minister about this?
I've gone to Nash to ask him about if he can correspond with Galloway, because again, I've got confidence in Nash, having experience in forestry and small businesses. I believe that Nash has engaged with both Galloway and Jones, and again, I can't find. I'll put it this way: two years ago, for an essential schools work visa, you're looking at $340 and a 2-week process time. Now, for that to change from $500 with a 4-month process time is absolutely ludicrous.
So what needs to happen then?
Well, I think the first things first is Galloway needs to explain why such an extreme delay considering the price rise. What's the reason? Nobody seems to know the reason. If you ask me what the reason is, I'd say it's red tape and bureaucracy and just bad administration and bad leadership.
Is the minister up for the job?
I think he should resign, to be honest with you. The whole thing's just in a mess, you know. Talking to the local contractors, they're frustrated. They've had a gutful. They feel like pulling their hair out. And these are guys that have been in the sector longer than me. So some guys have been in there for 20, 30 years. And it's the same old problems that should have been addressed last year when Shane Jones brought his office down. And I told them, look, this is what you need to do. You need a streamlined forestry visa. The processes aren't working. The red tape is phenomenal, and the practicality of it, it's just ludicrous.
That's forestry contractor Jason Koya. And just before we went to air, Jason got back in touch with us to tell us that just this afternoon he got an email to say that his visa applications have finally been accepted. So what does Immigration New Zealand and the Minister have to say in response to Jason's concerns? Immigration New Zealand says essential skills visa volumes are materially up. This has caused a genuine backlog of applications that need to be worked through as efficiently as possible. In the near term, this means bringing on more processing capacity to visa processing sites around the country. And it reiterates that INZ is taking steps to address the backlogs, including retaining and growing the Henderson office in Auckland and deferring the withdrawal of visa processing from Manila. Meanwhile, Immigration Minister Ian Lees-Galloway provided Checkpoint with a statement. He says, "I have raised my concerns with Immigration New Zealand and they are reporting to me regularly. I expect them to be fully focused on improving visa processing times." And we'll hear from Shane Jones later in the program. The government says developing new technology like robotic fruit pickers is the future of work and will help shift the focus from volume to value for those in the agriculture sector. But the opposition says while robotic technology or agri-tech is important, the short-term issue the government should be fixing is a shortage of seasonal workers. The outgoing Economic Development Minister David Parker today announced a call to action for business and industry leaders to develop new ideas and partner with the government as the economy responds to the fast-paced digital age. Our political reporter Joe Moyer was at the announcement.
The world is in the throes of the fourth revolution, which is changing the face of jobs and work. With that comes huge consequences, but David Parker says it also creates massive opportunities, in particular for the agri-tech sector. He says many agri-tech industries, those involved in agriculture, horticulture, fisheries and forestries, have to compete against countries where wages are lower.
But if we could automate some of the things that happen in horticulture, like robotic pruning or robotic picking of fruit, then we'd have the high-tech jobs, we'd have more horticultural production and we'd have less pressure on our rivers.
Mr Parker says Kiwis won't end up unemployed as a result of new technology because the sectors where there are shortages are the same ones currently looking overseas for labour.
Those industries are really short of seasonal labour and we've become ever more reliant on workers from overseas to pick our crops. So I'm sure that there's a way through this that is profitable for New Zealand and keeps all New Zealanders gainfully employed.
He says the key to this transition is upskilling the existing workforce to make sure people aren't left behind. But the National Party's economic development spokesperson, Todd McClay, says there's nothing new in the government's announcement, merely a continuation of what the last government was doing to keep pace in the digital age. He says a new survey out today showing New Zealand has its lowest level of business confidence in a decade shows the agricultural sector wants answers to its current problems, not plans for another 10 or 15 years' time.
A number of companies have invested significantly in the robotics to select the fruit, to sort it, and to pack it. So, the business community are already investing and doing a lot of this. Actually, what the kiwi fruit industry needs this year and next year and the coming years is more workers to pick the fruit, because if they don't, we won't get them to market.
The Chief Executive of NZ Tech, Graham Muller, says agri-tech is about pairing the fastest growing part of the economy, technology, with the most successful part, agriculture.
An example would be halter, put a thing around a cow's neck, use artificial intelligence to guide the cow around the farm, take away the gates, make the cow happier, that sort of thing. That's a really interesting innovation.
Mr Muller says New Zealand exports lots of agri-tech products. It's now about using them here. Mr Parker says a capital gains tax would have helped with investment in agri-tech, but that was blocked by New Zealand First, so now it's a case of relying on things like the Venture Capital Fund, announced in this year's budget. Phil Twyford will now pick up this work after last week's reshuffle, with Mr Parker saying he's happy to give up economic development, as he has plenty on his plate already. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Joe Moyer.
It is 5:23 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. As always, we'd love to hear from you about anything you've heard on the program, whether we should be, loosening visa constraints for planters in the forestry industry, or whether you think 3.5 months is too long to wait for an application to be processed, or anything else that's on your mind. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. The government's announced a raft of law changes it says will make the justice system fairer and safer for victims of sexual violence. The changes would mean a complainant may never have to set foot in court to give their evidence or face questions from the defence. It would be their automatic right to pre-record both to be played in court later. Judges will have to intervene if questions are considered unfair or inappropriate, and the rules around evidence about complainants' sexual history will also get stricter. I asked Justice Under-Secretary Jan Logie which of the proposed law changes she thinks would make the biggest difference to complainants in sexual violence cases.
I'm not
actually sure I can identify that, because we've heard from survivors, and I can point out a couple, that and I think the ability to pre-record their evidence so that they don't have to keep holding that story or necessarily turn up and talk about, one of the worst experiences of their lives in really intimate detail in front of a room full of strangers. I think that's going to make a significant difference, and we've been told from survivors that at the moment is really problematic. The other thing is the directing judges to intervene when they see inappropriate questioning, and enabling them to develop directions to counter rape, myths around sexual violence, will make a difference in terms of the quality of evidence, so that we're actually testing the defence on the basis of what's real, rather than confusion and misapprehensions.
Let's look specifically at the recording of evidence, right? So it would be not only recording the complainant's evidence in chief, but also pre-recording the defence's cross-examination. Now, why is that needed? Because a judge can close a court, they can allow evidence to be heard from behind a screen. They've already got mechanisms to try and reduce the trauma.
So they can use those, but at the moment, so adults have to apply for that rather than it being an entitlement. And there are very few cases where that cross-examination happens in a pre-record, which means, and we know from complainants and survivors who have gone through the process, that that is what they dread the most. And if we can enable that to happen earlier and outside of the theatre of the court, the overseas evidence is that actually it doesn't compromise the right to fair trial, but it does significantly reduce the trauma of the process.
You'll be aware, obviously, that some defence lawyers in New Zealand do not agree with that. They think that it raises some issues with the cross-examination being pre-recorded. The jury doesn't get to see that take place in front of their eyes. You and me sitting here talking to each other, I look at your body language, I assess your credibility, all of that is part of the discussion. You're taking that away from a jury, is what some defence lawyers would say. Is that fair?
No, it's not. I understand the concern, and but when this was tested, so in Australia, they tested it in a state to see if it did compromise that right to a fair trial, because that's our primary concern, right? Is doing everything we can to reduce the trauma while preserving that right to a fair trial, because we don't want anyone unfairly convicted. So they tested that and they found that it didn't. Pre-record did not compromise the right to fair trial, and then they rolled it out in the rest of the country.
On what? The number of convictions?
From the experience of feedback in the place of the parties involved. And the truth is, New Zealand, these changes are getting us to catch up with international best practice. We're not leading the way. This has been tested in other jurisdictions. And I also recognise that the defence, they have concerns about that. I have confidence we're going to be able to work out in drafting of it about the timing of
because
when
it could be
evidence is
outdated.
given.
A cross-examination could be superseded by new evidence, another witness who says something else.
Yeah.
And in fact, isn't it possible that it would actually counter everything you're trying to achieve? That person may have to give evidence more than once as a consequence of pre-recording.
Well, that would still, the primary evidence that they'd given and the cross-examination would still hold. They wouldn't have to repeat any of that, but you'd be able to add on to it. But I do think that we will be working really closely with the profession to draft the legislation to take those concerns into account, and I'm really confident we can do it.
A lot of this is about, and your press release says, this is about ensuring fairness and safety for victims of sexual violence. This question may make some people uncomfortable, but by using the word victim, you're presupposing a position, aren't you?
Yes.
And some people would argue that there is sympathy for people who present in court as the victim versus the defendant. So there is an imbalance already, is the argument.
In the court process, primarily they will be described as a complainant, and we're not changing that in the legislation. However, when the evidence has been that we've had about a 1% conviction rate relative to the prevalence of this violence in our society, I think it's okay to talk in this context about victims, because we know we are failing to get the convictions, and a lot of that is about the confidence in the system for people to report.
Some of the things that you have not done but you're going to continue to look at, so that resolution service was one of them, right? And another one is to potentially move away from juries in sexual violence cases in favour of judges alone. Where is the justification for that when it is a significant part of our culture to be judged by your peers?
Sure. And so we're not at an end point of saying yes or no to any of these.
But you're
we're
still
really
going down that
investigating.
road.
Absolutely, because one, there's again a body of academic research that has said that this needs further investigation, has put it up as a solution. Other jurisdictions have done it. It came out of the Victims Hui, organised by the Chiefs Victims Advisor not long ago, a very strong call for judge-alone trials with specialist advisors. And we also know that a judge-alone trial doesn't automatically resolve the concerns of victims, and that we really, if we're going to do that, it is a big call. So we have to be really sure that it's going to deliver the benefits and still ensure that balance, and that we have the mandate from the country to do that if we need to.
That was Jan Logie, and those law changes will be introduced later this year. Coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, while Aucklanders are being asked to save water, move over Wellywood, here comes Westywood, and the 15-year-old who beat Wimbledon veteran Venus Williams. We'd love to hear from you. Get in touch on the text 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Do you think that we should ditch juries in sexual violence cases and just go with a judge alone? Interested in your thoughts on that. But standing by right now with the headlines is Susanna.
A Gisborne forestry contractor is calling for the Immigration Minister's resignation, saying delays in processing migrant worker visas is costing the industry and potentially robbed the region of hundreds of thousands of dollars. Jason Koya currently employs 24 full-time workers, 10 of them are from overseas. He told Checkpoint he's still looking for up to 40 more planters and says he is being stymied by unreasonable immigration wait times. A significant change for victims in sexual violence cases means they may not have to appear in a courtroom at all. Fear and anxiety about court appearances prevents many women from reporting what has happened to them. Under changes announced by the government today, victims will have the right to choose whether they give their evidence in the witness box or by audio-visual link or pre-recorded video. The Parliamentary Under-Secretary to the Justice Minister, Jan Logie, says that could mean a video of a police interview could be played in court, followed by a video of the cross-examination. The Secretary for Education, Iona Holstead, has warned that resolving primary and intermediate school principals' pay demands could be difficult. Members of the Educational Institute today delivered letters to the Ministry's regional and head offices calling for a better offer than the one they rejected last week. Iona Holstead says the package on offer to principals is worth $64 million over 3 years. The Army has been called in to help remove garbage from a spilt landfill on the west coast. Heavy rain washed out a west coast landfill near Fox Glacier in March, sending thousands of tonnes of rubbish into the Fox River. The Westland District Council has been calling for more money and volunteers to assist with the clean-up. A New Zealander in Hong Kong says violent protests, which ended in demonstrators breaking into Parliament, have been disturbing. Dozens of protesters ram-raided the glass at the Legislative Council building in Hong Kong, allowing hundreds to enter and graffiti the walls. Those are the latest news headlines on RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. If you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Let's go to business now. Giles Beckford is standing very by. Giles, another day, another business confidence survey. I stand very by to be wowed by the results.
What would our lives be without them? That's all I could say. This one is from the Institute of Economic Research. It's one of the more closely regarded, better regarded surveys, but it shows that sentiment's fallen to the weakest level in 10 years. That's the headline level. But also for firms' view of their own prospects, their own outlook, that's down to the lowest level since early 2009. It would seem the main reason this time, it's not for the local government, which is normally regarded as the main culprit, but in fact the worsening global outlook, those dark clouds, those rather gloomy predictions we keep hearing about the world economy slowing, trade wars and the like, and the effect that that will have. So that's making manufacturers in particular glum, but it's right through the rest of the business community. Businesses are finding that their profits are being squeezed, that sales are slowing. They're not hiring people like they used to. All in all, they're getting a bit lean, perhaps a little bit mean, perhaps getting into shape where they will be able to withstand something that's significantly worse if it were to occur. Now, the NZIR says that on the basis of this survey, they're thinking the economy will slow to perhaps below 2% annual growth in the second half of this year. And we're growing just around 2.5% at the moment on an annual basis. So it wouldn't take too much for us to dip down to that level. For many, of course, this is another reason why the Reserve Bank of New Zealand will want to cut interest rates, possibly as soon as next month, but certainly by the end of the year. And just to add a little bit of spice to it, Christina Leong, who is the principal economist at the NZIR, says that probably a rate cut isn't needed. It doesn't have much effect in perking up the economy. But in the game of global interest rates and global currencies, probably the RBNZ cannot afford not to cut. In other words, if it leaves interest rates unchanged, that will see the New Zealand dollar rise because our rates will be higher than most other parts of the world. The funny money, the speculative money will flow in here and will boost the value of the currency. Bad for exporters. And another reason why the RBNZ may feel it needs to cut next month, the Reserve Bank of Australia in the past hour has just cut its cash rate to a record low 1%. Once it goes below 1%, one starts to wonder where they are. They'll be in uncharted territory. 1%. And of course, you will remember that after the global financial crisis, there were parts of the world where, in fact, you were having to pay the bank to keep your money in their vaults, not the other way around as it was supposed to be. In other words, they were trying to give you every reason not to store your money, but in fact to invest it. Of course, a lot of people speculated on that, and that's why share markets are probably as strong as they are today.
Interesting. Hey, what's going on with the Westland Dairy Cooperative? There's a last-minute bid to upset its sale, and the sale was to be a Chinese company, wasn't it?
It is. It will go to a vote of the shareholders on Thursday. The Chinese state-owned company Yili, it's one of the biggest dairy companies in the world. It's been on a quiet acquisition trail and expansion trail in the past few years. It already has plants here in New Zealand and operates here locally. Firms such as Yili look for processing capacity, sources of dairy product, which they can actually make up and send back to China. They're not worrying too much about supplying the New Zealand market or anywhere else in the world. Westland Cooperative really has been a basket case. It's been financially strapped for years, and this $588 million proposed sale will be the saviour of it. It has been lagging in its payments to farmers, the level of payments to farmers, well behind Fonterra, the likes of Synlait and Tatua. So a sale on Thursday looks like it will be it will be approved by somewhat desperate shareholders. But there's a small group of shareholders, or in fact former shareholders, who say, look, we're owed $11 million, and under cooperative rules, you get paid a certain amount for your shares when you depart. There's a 5-year delay possibility that they could delay that payout. And that was designed when the cooperative was in its heyday to stop a run on the cooperative, everybody getting out and asking for their money back, and that would put pressure on the finances. But come Thursday, it may be that Westland isn't a cooperative anymore. It's a Chinese-owned company, and these shareholders are saying, we're owed $11 million, why can't we get it back? Westland doesn't want to play ball, Yili doesn't want to play ball, so they're going to the Overseas Investment Office, who have to approve the sale, saying, oi, look out for Kiwis first. We may not have too much money in the game, but $11 million is $11 million, and it's owed to us. Can we get some satisfaction first? We'll wait to see if they have any impact on that.
OK, Giles, let's do a quick bolt around the markets, shall we?
Oh, look. Another day, another record close for the share market. It's up 67 points. It's about 0.2%, 10,531. And the New Zealand dollar sitting quite comfortably at 66.7 US, 95.6 Australian and 52.8 British pence.
Thanks, Giles. Giles Beckford there with our business wrap this evening. West Auckland is gearing up to host the most expensive TV production of all time, and the businesses around the studio are hoping to get a slice of Jeff Bezos's billions. Industry insiders say Mr. Bezos' Amazon Studios are set to produce the majority of the Lord of the Rings series in New Zealand, with West Auckland to become the main base for the epic 5-year production. Matthew Tunison headed out to Westywood this afternoon.
It seems everyone in West Auckland has signed a non-disclosure agreement, so they aren't willing to go on record and risk being sued out of existence by the world's richest man. But they will know what's going on. There's already said to be some pre-production work happening at the Auckland Film Studios in Henderson. Some of the businesses RNZ spoke to have already secured deals to provide services for the production. Fortunately, Joe Pilkington from First Scene Costume and Party Hire in Avondale isn't obliged to abide by the worst-kept secret in the West.
There'll be a huge number of crew, international and local, who'll have celebrations here. There'll be a lot of corporates that jump on board for themed events, and also there'll be some props and costumes that no doubt we will possibly be able to hire to the production itself.
So will you be stocking up on Middle-earth costumes and stuff?
We're always stocking up on Middle-earth. It's an amazingly popular theme. But possibly will extend out. We've already got hundreds and hundreds of items, but can always make room for more.
She says West Auckland is becoming well established as a film location, and it's more than capable of dealing with large-scale productions.
Just in the area of Avondale and in the area of Henderson, you've got AV companies, film studios, prop hire companies, you've got amazing set designers. It's all go around here.
But it's not just businesses directly associated with film and TV that stand to benefit. Many manufacturers in the area regularly get involved with production work, building weird and wacky props or elaborate sets. John Laverne from the small fiberglass business NZ Comptech helped to build the underwater vessels for the monster shark movie The Meg, and he's hoping someone from Amazon is listening.
Well, there's so many parts of that you probably wouldn't realise it could be made out of fiberglass, from walls, all sorts of random structures, and for us to build it out of fiberglass, it would mean that if there was one particular thing that needed to be replicated, like helmets or anything like that for soldiers, we could build them by the hundreds. All we'd need is 1 or 2 moulds, and we could mass produce that as many times as you wanted.
Central Park and Henderson Business Association's Calvin Armstrong says news of the production coming west is great for the area.
Whether it's business or just local community and schools, I think it's fantastic. It's just gives that little push, a little bit of encouragement for very young and up-and-coming people to get into the workforce. It might be some great opportunities for them.
The Economic Development Minister, David Parker, confirmed today that Amazon has shown strong interest in producing the series in New Zealand and says an announcement about it is imminent. He confirmed that the normal tax breaks would be offered and no cap would be applied for Amazon. It's been variously calculated that this could amount to some $375 million.
All of us at some level begrudge the subsidies that the film industry has around the world, but it is a reality that they are subsidised And if you want to have a big film industry in New Zealand, you have to match the world market.
RNZ understands that the call went out in May for actors to audition for the project. Actors were told it was top secret, and all that casting agents would say was that it was for a major project. In Auckland for Checkpoint, call Matthew Tunis and Tene.
Hong Kong's leader has condemned what she calls the extreme use of violence by protesters who ransacked the territory's Parliament building. Hundreds of mostly young people yesterday occupied the building for several hours after breaking away from a march marking the anniversary of Hong Kong's handover to Chinese rule. They were eventually evicted after the police fired tear gas. The protest is the latest in a series of demonstrations against a proposed law that critics fear could be used to extradite political dissidents to mainland China. Hong Kong's embattled leader, Carrie Lam, says the bill is currently suspended and there's no timetable for its return. Here's the BBC's Rupert Wingfield-Hayes recapping extraordinary scenes on the streets of Hong Kong.
Exactly 22 years after China took control here, the youth of Hong Kong vented their fury, attempting to smash their way into the territory's parliament.
You can see these more radical activists. They've just broken through the window of the LegCo building here behind me. They've managed to smash through this toughened glass, and they're now trying to get inside the LegCo building. Inside, you can see there are large numbers of riot police. So far, they've held back.
The destruction continued, but the police stood by. It looked very much like they'd been ordered not to intervene. Meanwhile, across town, hundreds of thousands of other Hong Kongers were on the march in a second huge anti-government protest. This one was completely peaceful. But even here, there was sympathy for those besieging Parliament.
I understand what they are doing, and I thank you to them for taking the risk to go to jail and try to stop the government from handing over all the lives of Hong Kong people to CCP.
Back outside Parliament, the trashing continued. The police now nowhere to be seen.
Now they're trying to smash their way through the steel shutters. And the crowd here, every so often, they start shouting, "Jiao, jiao" means add oil. In other words, keep going, keep going. What's the point of this?
We only know peaceful protest is not useful anymore at this moment. So you can say it's drawing attention or make some noise to make people know what happens here and let more people know the government is not listening to our peaceful protests.
Finally, the steel shutters gave way and the protesters poured in. Inside, the trashing continued. In the chamber, they raised the old British colonial flag. What must the Chinese Communist government in Beijing be thinking? How long till there are mainland Chinese troops on the streets of Hong Kong?
Rupert Wingfield-Hayes reporting. Primary and intermediate school principals took their campaign for a better pay deal to the steps of the Education Ministry today. Members of the Educational Institute fronted up to 9 of the ministry's regional offices to hand over protest letters. They warned that principals could boycott ministry-related work until they get a better offer than the one they rejected last week. Here's our education correspondent, John Gerritsen.
Darren Kerr is the principal of 50-pupil Whareama School in rural Wairarapa. But today he travelled more than 130 kilometres to the Education Ministry's head office in Wellington, where he told Checkpoint that running a small school is a good job, but a hard one.
Extremely difficult, hugely complex. With a small staff of only 3 people, I tend to have a lot fall back on me. My staff are fantastic, but there's only so much you can expect your teachers to do, and I still have the same amount of workload and paperwork as a large school does, so it does fall back on a few people.
Darren Kerr is one of hundreds of principals who believe the ministry's offer of pay rises of between 9 and nearly 14% over 3 years doesn't go far enough. It doesn't stop senior teachers from earning more than many principals, and it doesn't give them pay parity with secondary school principals. Mr Kerr says after more than 12 months of bargaining, he just wants a fair deal.
I've seen a lot of changes, so yeah, I feel very strongly about it, and just want some fairness to the role that I'm doing, and workload really, and making sure that everything's fair and equal across the whole principal collective.
Linda Knight de Blois is the principal of Glenview School in Porirua East, which has 94 pupils. She says the ministry's offer doesn't recognise that principals of small schools like hers have a lot of responsibility.
I'm not a teaching principal. I have a little bit of teaching that I do, but many small school principals are trying to teach. They're trying to be the special needs coordinator, the caretaker, the admin office person, the teacher aide, social worker, nurse, etc., and we're just not going to attract good teachers to those roles if we're paying them less than DPs, APs in bigger schools.
Mark Potter from Wellington's Berhampore School is the principal's representative on the NZEI executive. He says principals are determined to win a better deal, even though their main ally in the industrial stoush, the 28,000 primary and intermediate teachers, have settled.
Across the country, the principals are absolutely determined. I've never seen such unity about this. Collectively, people are very upset that they've been left out of parity.
Aren't you on a hiding to nothing, though, given the government saying, look, we are not adding any more money to this?
Well, we are on a hiding to nothing in our jobs. That's our problem. So what we really need to do is have the Minister, he's come a long way with supporting the teachers. Please just keep going. You're so close. That's what we need.
The Secretary for Education, Iona Holstead, accepted the principal's letters in Wellington. She says the ministry and the union will meet this week to discuss restarting negotiations.
We're meeting with the President of the NZEI later this week because, of course, this was a recommended settlement. The union did recommend it, so we have to start with talking to the union. And probably we'll need to start thinking about when we can get back around the table to think about how we can reorganise the package to meet some of their needs. It's going to be a bit difficult because we have got a package that we're limited to negotiating within.
In the meantime, principals are voting today and tomorrow on whether to withdraw cooperation from the ministry until their collective agreement is settled. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi, ko John Gerritsen tēnei.
Let's get to some of your feedback now. A lot of it is coming in about the interview we did earlier in the program with a forestry contractor in Tairāwhiti in the Gisborne area. He's really struggling to get workers to plant seedlings there. He needs about 40 people and locals just don't turn up, he says, and he's had to sack a few of them. Tina has got in contact to say, sorry, no sympathy for forestry planting boss. They've got to pay more. Like with anything, if you pay peanuts, you get monkeys. Pay better wages. It's hard work, as you know, Lisa. Yep, it is hard work. And there are a few people who are in agreement with Tina. This person says increase the dollars per tree. Obviously, the money isn't worth it for a New Zealander. For tree planting, same goes for apples and kiwi fruit. And Kerry says these guys only want cheap labour who won't complain about the pay, the hours or the hours of work. Of course, New Zealanders don't want to do this sort of work for the pay or the hours. They need to get real and pay decently, and they will have all the New Zealanders that they want. If you're listening in, Tina and Kerry, let us know. How much do you reckon they should pay? Jason Coyer has upped the price. He's paying $30 a box of 100 seedlings. That's about $5 more than other contractors pay, and he says some of his contractors are taking home $2,000 a week. So how much more should he pay? On the other side of the coin, this person says Bill English was right. A lot of these young people are pretty darned hopeless. Bring back Bill, they say. And finally, this person's been in touch to say it's simply too easy to live on a benefit and not work. Until things become genuinely tight and people have to dig deep in themselves, the agricultural industry will struggle to find Kiwis to fill these roles. The solution is to change the welfare, not immigrant workers. Let me know what you think of that as well. Text 2101 and tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. The usual wet weather months are proving particularly dry this year, with parts of the country recording their driest January to June on record. NIWA says much of the upper North Island has been exceptionally dry, with some places receiving less than half of the normal amount of rain. The lack of rain has left Auckland's water supply lower than usual, prompting calls for Aucklanders to conserve water and cut down on shower times. Nita Blake-Person reports.
It's been an exceptionally dry start to the year, with NIWA revealing Auckland, Hamilton, Whangarei, Whitianga and Kaitaia have all had the driest first half of the year on record. NIWA scientist Chris Brandolino says some places have received half of their normal rainfall.
At the airport in Auckland, 321.2 millimetres occurred during the 6-month period from January 1st to June 30th. Typically during that period, we get about 515 millimeters, but we received 62% of that. Hamilton, for example, received just under 276 millimeters of rain. That's roughly half, 53% to be precise, of normal.
It's also been the 5th warmest start to the year on record, according to NIWA's 7-station temperature series, which began in 1909. Chris Brandolino says over the short term there is some rain forecast, but longer term things are looking pretty dry.
The Upper North Island, so Bay of Plenty, Waikato, North and Auckland regions, we're pegging it at about an equal chance for rainfall to be either near normal or below normal for the months of July, August, and September. So to put differently, or another way, above normal rainfall is pretty darn unlikely as a whole for the next 3 months.
That dry weather has left Auckland City's water storage at a quarter below normal levels for this time of year. Auckland's water care spokesperson Rosalind Klein says its dams got about 40% less rainfall than normal between January and June.
So our dams are located in the Hunua and Waitakere ranges, and we've had 34 to 44% less rainfall than normal, which is a significant difference. So as a result, our total storage is 59%. And usually, same time on a normal year, we would expect to be 25% above that. So we just have a limited water resource compared to the usual.
The low water levels mean the dams are on track to be below normal when summer arrives, and Rosalind Klein says if Aucklanders can cut back on their water usage now, it will help in the coming months.
If everyone was to reduce their shower time by 1 minute, that would save 18 million litres of water a day, so it's really significant. So yes, shorter shower times, maybe making sure that when people do the laundry, it's full loads, any kind of leak, fixing it in the house, any little bit like that helps because it adds up.
The dry weather has also affected ski fields across the country, which have been busy making snow to cover the shortfall. Richie Owen of Mount Hutt in Canterbury says it's becoming a pattern and that the season now seems to be arriving a month later.
Things have been a little bit probably on the dry side to what we've seen in the past. If you compare it to last year, it's quite similar conditions to what we were looking like this time last year. I mean, we're holding in there really well, considering it has been quite a dry June.
Bridget Lignavsky of Cadrona Alpine Resort says last year's season arrived late but turned out to be the best in 20 years. She says their long-term planning is factoring in less predictable weather patterns. And right on cue, the Met Service says snow began falling in the lower south this morning and looks set to move up the country over the next few days. For Checkpoint, Nita Blakeperson.
It's about 4 minutes away from 6. You're with Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. They say you should never meet your heroes, but a 15-year-old American tennis player has gone one better. She's conquered hers. Corey Goff has beaten Wimbledon veteran Venus Williams in the big upset so far in the opening round of the tournament. The ABC's Isabel Rowe reports.
She's the youngest player at Wimbledon this year, and in straight sets, she's turfed out the tournament's oldest player, 39-year-old Venus Williams. Corey Goff, nicknamed Coco, was a wildcard entrant into the tournament and made the most of the opportunity.
I never thought this would happen. I'm literally living my dream right now. Not many people get to say that.
Her parents watching on from the stands. Corey Goff finished with her hands on her head, appearing scarcely able to believe her performance against her idol.
She just told me that congratulations and to keep going and good luck. After a match, I told her that just thank you for everything she did. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for her. And I was just telling her that she's so inspiring. And I always wanted to tell her that. And even though I met her before, I guess now I had the guts too.
Venus Williams seemed just as stunned.
Yeah, she did everything well today. I mean, she put the ball in the court, which was much better than I did, and served well, moved well. It was a great match for her.
What do you think of her future? Could she go to the very top, do you feel?
I think the sky's the limit. It really is.
And that was it Venus Williams ending that piece, five-time Wimbledon champion she is, who went down to 15-year-old Corey Goff in the first round at Wimbledon. Let's go to some of your feedback now. I was a bit engrossed in it when you came back to me there. We're getting a lot on tree planting and the workage shortage. Not much sympathy for the forestry contractor. This email in response to the man looking for overseas workers to plant tree seedlings and saying that locals can't cut it and the overseas workers will make this scheme work is being disingenuous. I worked as a tree planter for 3 months in my 20s and it just about crippled me. Can relate to that. It's bloody hard work, this person says, and 20 years later I still have ongoing back problems. Overseas workers will probably stick at it longer because the incentives, i.e. fantastic earnings in their eyes, will make them stay longer than locals who are after continued physical strain will often decide that it's not worth their health. They have other options and don't have to worry about immigration or lack of other employment opportunities. In my view, this man and other employers are relying on desperate people and their own skewed narrative to coerce the authorities into relaxing immigration policies. Jeff says, provide visas to Pacific Islanders who do work hard and who will remit their earnings to their respective countries. This is the most effective way to assist Pacific Island communities. Jeff says he's been working or had worked in development in countries for 30 years and he thinks that this is an option that works. On a totally different topic, Jan Logie was talking about changes they're making in court to make the justice environment safer for victims. This from a defence lawyer of 23 years who's been doing mostly sex criminal trials, he says. The provisions Jan Logie talked about are already in place. Most women and almost all children complainants do not enter into the courtroom any longer, and the legislation has been this since 2007.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leata-awa tēnei. A significant change for victims in sexual violence cases means they may not have to appear in a courtroom at all. Fear and anxiety about court appearances prevents many women from reporting what has happened to them. Under changes announced by the government today, victims will have the right to choose whether they give their evidence in the witness box or by audio-visual link or pre-recorded video. The Parliamentary Under-Secretary to the Justice Minister, Jan Logie, says that could mean a video of a police interview could be played in court, followed by a video of the cross-examination. She plans to introduce legislation to Parliament by the end of the year, but there's no time frame for the changes to be implemented. A Gisborne forestry contractor says it's taken almost 3 months to have visa applications approved for migrant workers vital to the industry. Jason Coyer says delays have been costing the industry in the region hundreds of thousands of dollars. He's been looking for up to 40 more tree planters this season and has been stymied by unreasonable immigration waiting times. Mr Coyer told Checkpoint some workers can make $2,000 a week, but he simply can't get locals to fill the jobs.
Migrant workers are reliable, they're honest, they're trustworthy, they're drug-free, they're alcohol-free, and they're easy to train, and they hit production target every day.
Jason Coyer says he got an email just this afternoon to say that his visa applications have finally been accepted. Primary and intermediate school principals have hand-delivered letters urging the Education Ministry to make them a better pay offer. Members of the Educational Institute handed over the letters at the Ministry's head office and 8 regional offices. Our education correspondent John Gerritsen reports.
The letters warn that principals could boycott ministry-related work until they get a better offer than the one they rejected last week. They say they want an offer that gives them parity with secondary principals and ensures that principals of small schools are paid more than senior teachers at big schools. They told RNZ News the government does not seem to understand how tough it is to run a small school. The Secretary for Education, Iona Holstead, says the Ministry and the Union will meet this week to discuss restarting negotiations, but the Ministry can't offer more money than it already has. Ko John Gerritsen tēnei.
Wellington motorists have been queuing up to fill their tanks at the capital's newest petrol station. The Hamilton-based Waitomo Group opened a new station on Hutt Road in Thorndon at midday. For the next 48 hours, unleaded 91 will be selling there for $1.86 a litre. According to the online website Gaspy, the average price for 91 in Wellington has been $2.20. The Minister of Commerce and Consumer Affairs, Chris Fa'afoi, says the competition will be good for Wellington.
It's the market working, and already we've seen fuel prices drop. Obviously, it's a different offering. You don't see a shop here. They're trying to keep costs to the minimum, and I think that extra choice for consumers is good.
The Minister of Commerce and Consumer Affairs, Chris Foy. Hong Kong's Parliament building remains closed after it was ransacked by protesters angry at the city's leader refusing to drop an extradition bill. The bill, which would allow criminal suspects to be extradited to China for trial, has been withdrawn from the Parliament but could be resubmitted to a future session of the legislature. The ABC's Bill Birtles is in Hong Kong.
Hundreds of protesters managed to get inside 22 years to the day that China took control of Hong Kong. They vented their fury, trashing and ransacking the besieged building, defacing the emblem of Hong Kong in the central chamber, raising the old British colonial flag, and spray painting graffiti across the walls. At midnight, riot police issued a warning, and then finally, baton charges caused most to flee. Outside, thousands more clashed with police. At 4 o'clock in the morning in Hong Kong, the chief executive called a press conference to express her dismay. The Beijing-backed leader has now withstood the pressure of more than 3 straight weeks of protests.
Bill Birtles reporting. Taupo residents are being asked to conserve water after a water main ruptured there this afternoon. The main broke just after 2 o'clock, causing a washout on Lake Terrace and the collapse of part of the footpath. The Taupo District Council says it could take a couple of hours to repair the pipe. It says in the meantime, residents are asked to refrain from flushing and putting water into the wastewater system. Lake Terrace between Ruapehu Street and Ferry Road is currently closed while an assessment is undertaken. It's coming up to 5 minutes past 6. The veteran midfielder Nonu may be about to extend his All Blacks career after an injury to the Crusaders' Ryan Crotty ruled him out of Saturday's Super Rugby final and the All Blacks Rugby Championship campaign. Crotty and lock Scott Barrett suffered broken hands in the semi-final win over the Hurricanes and are set to miss tests against South Africa, Australia and Argentina, with the squad to be named in an hour's time. Brenton Visroy reports.
Crotty's injury is likely to open the door for someone else in the All Blacks midfield. Sonny Bill Williams, Jack Goodhue and Anton Leonard-Brown appear certainties, and now Ngani Laumape and perhaps Ma'anonu will join them in New Zealand's first squad of the year. It's a similar situation at lock, where Barrett has been the first choice backup to Brodie Retallick and Sam Whitelock. Patrick Tuipulotu and Jackson Hemapo are promoted up the pecking order, and now both are likely to be selected. All will be confirmed when the squad is named in Auckland tonight. Ko Brenton Vanissleroy, aho.
It's 20 years since Roger Federer made his first Wimbledon appearance, but he's excited as ever for his first round match tonight. Federer, a 20 times Grand Slam champion, won his last Wimbledon title in 2017. He's seated second behind Novak Djokovic and faces South African Lloyd Harris in the opening round.
I feel very excited being here, to be honest. Halle was great. I thought I had a great fun clay court season. I was able to transition well to the grass and then to here, most importantly with no injury. So I think that's been good.
Roger Federer. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, a Tuesday feature on vaccination and where it doesn't reach, either because people can't or won't vaccinate. The Comet is coming on this week's Song Crush. And this week's After Dinner speaker, Stella McQueen, takes time out from discussing the wonders of live fish to focus on the remarkable fossil record recently unearthed in Otago's Folden Mar. On Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow for the northern half of the North Island from Taranaki and Taupo northwards, including Bay of Plenty and northern Gisborne. Often cloudy with a few showers. Rain developing in Taranaki tomorrow, heavy about the mountain. For the remainder of the North Island, mainly fine tonight. Rain developing tomorrow, heavy falls about the Taradua Range, clearing in Wellington by tomorrow evening. Bulla, Nelson and Marlborough, scattered showers today, mainly in the ranges. Rain tomorrow with some heavy falls, easing easing to showers in Bulla in the afternoon and clearing elsewhere later in the day. Westland, scattered rain becoming widespread and heavy falls this evening, easing to showers tomorrow afternoon, but thunderstorms possible in the south. For Fiordland, rain heavy at times, thunderstorms possible tomorrow. Canterbury, fine with a variable high cloud. Otago and Southland, scattered showers, possibly thundery about the south coast tomorrow evening. Chatham Islands, cloudy periods, a few showers tomorrow morning. You're with RNZ National. It's coming up to 8 minutes past 6.
Thanks, Susanna. And this is Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. A forestry contractor who cannot recruit enough tree planters this season says local workers don't show up and he can't get migrant workers from the Pacific here fast enough. Jason Koya is having to turn work down and he thinks the Immigration Minister should resign over unacceptable wait times for migrant visa applications. Immigration New Zealand and its Minister Ian Lees-Galloway concede there is a backlog and they are working to clear it and to become more efficient. The shortage of workers is so dire, Mr Koya says, that he and other contractors in the sector are adamant Shane Jones's 1 billion trees program will fail to meet its targets. Forestry and Regional Economic Development Minister Shane Jones joins me now. Kia ora, Minister.
Kia ora, greetings from the brow of Remutaka Hill.
Well, let's hope the phone line holds out. So these concerns that Jason Koya and other contractors have, are they legitimate? They cannot get locals off the couch, they're saying.
Well, I hear them loud and clear. And I sort of feel that the government is stuck between two poles. At one level, it's absolutely essential that we turn the lives around of their potential workforce, young Kiwis. There's no silver bullet in terms of how quickly they can be made work ready. And obviously, as someone who was involved in establishing the RSE scheme, the Migrant Labour Scheme from the Pacific under Helen Clark's government, I see there is definitely potential for us to draw on more Pacifica workers. In fairness to the Minister of Immigration, he's well aware of their concerns. However, other ministers are probably in the position of high expectations that we will get my neffs off the couch and we will get them work ready. And I rather suspect that Mr Koya is caught between those poles a tad like myself.
Well, what's he supposed to do in the meantime then? I know you want to get these people off the couch, but he's tried. He's done an extensive advertising campaign. He's worked with the Ministry of Social Development. They came to him, he says, with 0 applicants. He managed to get a few. He's had to let 80% of the ones that he hired go because they don't turn up to work. So what are the options? Is he just supposed to lose money while those people get work ready?
Well, I don't think the man is losing money. What he's unable to do is to take on additional contracts. And I would say to all contractors in New Zealand and the owners of kiwi fruit orchards, as you focus on the financial capital in your business, you've got to focus on the human capital. This is not just purely a political problem. Rightly or wrongly, our government has nailed its colours to the mast of turning the lives around of the rangatahi and these young people. Now, I'd like to give up on them as well. Like the last government, like Bill English said, you're scraping the bottom of the barrel, bugger them, and then just go to the Pacific and bring in our brethren. Well, I'm not prepared to do that.
Are they paying enough? Is that the problem? Should they be paying more?
Well, there's a lot of work to be done in terms of professionalising the silviculture sector. Mr Koya has a fine reputation, so I don't want to make this about him and his business.
Generally, I'm saying, because we're getting a lot of feedback from people saying, why would you get off your backside for that kind of money? So, generally, do you think this industry needs to pay more to get people motivated to work for them?
No, I think there's plenty of examples in the orchard sector, kiwi fruit and apples, where they are not paying enough to make New Zealand families want to send their kids to those jobs. And it is hard work in the forestry sector. We are meeting our planting targets. And look, I've advocated let's bring in some more Pacific workers, but I've got to accept I'm one voice amongst a host.
How many more would you like to see coming in?
The reality is I'm not going to give up on training the rangatahi.
Okay, so you're not giving up on the rangatahi. I think people would accept that. But at the same time, how many extra workers do you think should be allowed in?
Well, earlier this year I advocated for us to bring between 600 and 700. I'm advised that 300 have been uncovered by the Social Welfare Department and dispatched to work in various places. In the north, we don't seem to have this particular problem, but it is a growing problem in the Hawke's Bay and the East Coast area. More the Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, I'm advised.
So have you had a conversation with the Immigration Minister and asked him to, get a move on?
Yeah, no, I have to defend Mr. Lees Galloway on this issue. He realises that our party, New Zealand First, we're doubting Thomas's about the notion we should continue to offer unfettered access to migrant labour. But he also has heard me loud and clear that.
But you want your forests planted, don't you, Minister? So that means you need to have people to put seedlings into the ground. Have you got any commitment from him to hustle the visa process along? They acknowledge that it's too slow. Yeah, well, I haven't heard him exactly say that, but your point is well made. We can do better. And during the course of the next few days, I'll continue my efforts at lobbying him and hurrying it up. I've got a lot of sympathy for what the guys are saying out there in the field, but I'm not a contractor. I'm a politician, and I'm not publicly going to do what the last government did and give up on the rangatahi. So how long should they have to wait for a visa? They're waiting. Well, the Jason Koya waited 3 months for these. What's an acceptable wait time in your view? Yeah, and I would have thought you could turn it around within 8 to 10 weeks. I mean, it's not very far away. And I'll take up Mr. Koya's cause, but I'm not going to work with anyone who has got a very bleak and irredeemable view about the young people of New Zealand. Are you suggesting he does? He's tried. Well, I don't want to hear contractors writing off the next generation. They're drug-riddled. I had to get rid of them. They won't come to work. There's two sides to the work equation. There's the employee as well as the employer. Thanks for joining us this evening. That is Forestry and Regional Economic Development Minister Shane Jones there. The government has unveiled reforms to better protect victims of sexual violence who decide to take their cases to court. There have long been calls for changes to be made to the justice process, including recommendations from the Law Commission. Our social issues reporter, Sarah Robson, was at today's announcement in Auckland.
The Parliamentary Under-Secretary to the Justice Minister, Jan Logie, says research has consistently shown that giving evidence is the hardest part of the justice process for sexual violence victims. Under the changes announced today, victims will have the right to choose whether they give their evidence in court in the witness box or by audio-visual link or pre-recorded video. Ms Logie says that could mean a video of a police interview could be played in court, followed by a video of the cross-examination.
This could mean not having to come to the trial at all, which can be a huge relief. It also allows the healing process to take precedence. We know many complainants don't feel they can move on with their lives until they've given their evidence.
If victims do give their evidence in court, Jan Logie says this will be recorded so they don't have to come back to court if there is a retrial. There will also be more training for defence lawyers about how to act in the interests of their client while reducing trauma for the complainant. Jan Logie says the training won't be compulsory at this stage, but uptake will be evaluated after 3 years.
If we're not happy with it, after 3 years we will make it compulsory.
Jan Logie says judges will also get greater powers to intervene when lawyers do ask inappropriate questions.
We will require judges to step in if they think the questioning is improper. This is a really important step to make sure that both the question and the way it's asked don't cause unnecessary trauma.
Catherine McPhillips from the sexual abuse support organisation HELP says that's a fundamental change.
So now the expectation will be that people are treated well. We have that in the Victims' Rights Act. Victims are to be respected. But the way that defence lawyers are able to ask their questions now, is the opposite of respect. So judges will be able to enforce that need for respect.
Debbie Tohill from Rape Prevention Education says the changes are much needed. But as always, support services will need more funding to help victims who do decide to go through the court process.
There's not enough trained counsellors, and that's going to be a long process, a workforce development issue that will take a while to solve.
Jan Logie hopes to introduce legislation to Parliament by the end of the year and have it passed by the end of this term. There's no time frame for when the changes might come into effect. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi, ko Sarah Robson, aho.
It is 17 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. A drunk motorist who ran a red light, killing a taxi driver in Auckland's CBD, has been jailed for nearly 4 years. Farshad Esfahani T-boned a Toyota Prius while speeding through the city a few days before Christmas in 2017. The high-impact crash shunted the Prius 10 metres sideways, killing Abdul Rahim Fahad Sayed, a young father who had recently moved to New Zealand for a better life. Esfahani was sentenced in the High Court at Auckland this morning. Our court reporter Annika Smith was there.
After smashing into Abdul Saeed's vehicle, Farshad Esfahani got out of his car and told bystanders this.
Don't call the cops. Can you call me a taxi? And I hope that guy has insurance.
He'd just killed 29-year-old Abdul Saeed, a new father of a 5-month-old baby. Esfahani was gone by the time emergency services arrived, but a police Eagle helicopter quickly found him. He bowed his head in the High Court at Auckland this morning as a victim impact statement, penned by Mr Saeed's father in India, was read to the court. These are his words, but not his voice.
I go to my son's grave every single day after praying namaz. It's very painful, and I ask Allah to give my son back if possible. After that, I cry a lot.
Esfahani was driving drunk and speeding when he hit Mr Saeed. This morning, the court heard the then 20-year-old had earlier hit a pay station in a downtown car park. The police were called after an altercation with security staff, but Esfahani sped off. Travelling at an average speed of 87 kilometres, he ran 3 red lights on Simon Street before reaching the scene of the crash at Alex Evans Drive. Justice Wolford said both vehicles were severely damaged.
Police analysis established that your vehicle was travelling between 61 and 74 kilometres per hour on impact. Your vehicle hit the other vehicle at the driver's door. The driver died at the scene from severe blunt force trauma to the chest.
The judge said Esfahani made no effort to help Mr Saeed and fled the scene. He later blew more than 3 times the drink driving limit at the Auckland police station. He pleaded guilty to excess breath alcohol causing death, dangerous driving causing death and failing to stop and ascertain injury in May. This morning, Crown Prosecutor Emma Smith said the consumption of alcohol was an aggravating factor.
The maximum penalty for this type of offending did increase in 2011, which the courts have said must be taken as a clear signal from Parliament that this type of offending needs to be met with meaningful penalties to hold offenders accountable for the harm done and to deter others from behaving in a similar way.
She submitted a sentence of 5.5 years imprisonment was appropriate. Esfahani's defence lawyer Mark Ryan told the court his client was eligible for a sentence of home detention. He told the court the young man, who was 20 at the time of the offending, had no previous convictions.
This court and other sentencings has recognised the propensity for young people to not be aware of the risks and risky situation they're putting themselves in, and that's because of the volume of literature that shows a male's frontal lobe doesn't develop until 27.
Mr Ryan said a constructive restorative justice conference proved Esfahani's remorse was genuine.
This young man made a mistake. He's going to carry that mistake with him like a millstone around his neck for the rest of his life. Nothing he does is going to bring back the victim.
Now a toddler, Mr Saeed's son sat on his mother's lap in court this morning. Justice Wolford accepted Esfahani's remorse was genuine, but said the impact on Mr Saeed's family had been devastating. He jailed the 22-year-old for 3 years and 8 months and disqualified him from holding a driver's licence for 4 years. The judge also ordered he pay $12,000 to Mr Saeed's family to cover the lost vehicle. Atuiti ko te mātua ko Annika Smith aho.
Let's go to sport now. With the Rugby World Cup just 2.5 months away, the first All Blacks squad of the year will be announced in Auckland tonight. The squad is expected to include up to 41 players and will be for the All Blacks' first 2 matches of the Rugby Championship later this month. Sports reporter Clay Wilson is at the Ponsonby Rugby Club for the team naming, which starts at 7 o'clock, and he joins me now. Clay, you must be positively tingling with excitement. What are you expecting from tonight's announcement?
Yeah, good evening, Lisa. Like all Blacks fans around the country, we do know a few things. It's going to be a big squad, most likely around 41 players. We're not expecting too many surprises. And we also know that as of this morning, it's very unlikely we're going to see Ryan Crotty and Scott Barrett. Rugby followers would have seen the news. Ryan Crotty, a thumb injury, out for around 8 weeks and out of the entire Rugby Championship. And Scott Barrett, the lock from the Crusaders, suffering a finger injury, which puts him out for around 6 weeks. Some talk he may come back in the latter part of the Rugby Championship. There are some new faces being thrown around. Speaking about the Crusaders, Sevu Reece, the Fijian winger who set the competition alight, will he be able to join the outside back stocks, which are always very talented for the All Blacks? Josh Ioane, he's the Highlanders' first five, with Richie Mo'unga likely to be unavailable for the first game in Argentina of the Rugby Championship. He might come in for his first week in All Blacks camp. And Brad Weber, who has played one test but has really been one of the form halfbacks of the competition, set for a recall as a third halfback potentially.
So you mentioned Argentina there, first test of the year in a couple of weeks' time. So what kind of team are we likely to see there?
Yeah, I did touch on Richie Mo'unga there, so it has been already noted by Steve Hansen, the All Blacks coach, that it's likely very few, if any, Crusaders will be involved in that first game because of their involvement, obviously, in this weekend's Super Rugby final. And with so many of those Crusaders players part of the All Black squad and many of them starters as well, there is going to be opportunities for several players to make a statement. You look on the likes of the propping ranks, Owen Franks and Joe Moody out with the Crusaders, so the Auckland Blues duo, Ofa Tuangafasi and Carl Tuinukuafe, both could come in for some rare starts. Cody Taylor out at hooker with the Crusaders, and Dane Coles, who's had his troubles with injuries over the past 12 months, a chance to start in the All Blacks jersey again. And then in the midfield, with likely no Ryan Crotty and Jack Goodhue as well, his midfield partner, the Crusaders, we could see some excitement in the midfield with Sonny Bill Williams and Anton Leonard-Brown, and also Ngani Laumape from the Hurricanes, all in the mix there, and likely to be this two of the three starters there. So, yeah, we could see a very different team for that first game in Argentina with the Crusaders' involvement in that Super Rugby final.
So, yeah, the squad that's announced tonight is for the first two matches of the Rugby Championship, but what happens after that?
So we do know after those first two games it's going to be trimmed from likely around 40 to 41 players to 34 players for the final two matches of the Rugby Championship. Both of those games will be against the Wallabies in Perth and then back here in Auckland. And after that, I guess we'll have a much clearer idea about the makeup of the squad for the World Cup and what the selectors are thinking. The World Cup squad will be 31 players, so around 10 players less than will be named tonight. And we don't have a date for that announcement yet, but we do know the All Blacks have a game in Hamilton against Tonga before they go to the World Cup, about 2 weeks before their first game against Japan, in fact. So we expect we might have a World Cup squad before that game against Tonga on September 7th.
Yeah, so in terms of the selection tonight, just quickly, how much should we read into that in terms of the World Cup in Japan? Looking forward to that.
Yeah, well, with this squad tonight being so big, 40 to 41 players, you'd expect that the 31 for the World Cup, most, if not all of them, will come from this squad. But as we know in a sport like rugby, injuries do happen. So the likes of Ma'amonu, who we're not expecting to be named tonight, could still come into the mix in the midfield there if he does miss the cut tonight. But the bulk of the squad is fairly easy to predict. I guess tonight just gives us a bit of an insight into what the selectors have seen in this year's Super Rugby competition and in terms of the positions that they think are up for grabs for this World Cup squad.
Thank you, Clay. That's Clay Wilson standing very by at the Ponsonby Rugby Club for that All Blacks squad announcement, which is expected around 7 o'clock this evening. There were queues at the Cut Price petrol station. Waitomo opened when... Oh, hang on. Shall I start that again? Yeah, why not? There were queues as the Cut Price petrol station Waitomo opened its first outlet in the capital. Hamilton-based Waitomo opened its first site on the Hutt Road in Thorndon, promising to shake up the fuel industry, where motorists have been paying some of the highest prices for petrol. Reporter Harry Locke and video journalist Dom Thomas went out to see if drivers were taking up the offer.
Commuters in the capital pay some of the highest prices at the pump. But today, eagle-eyed motorists spotted a new kid on the block. Discount fuel supplier Waitomo offering customers cut-price petrol at the launch of its new outlet in Wellington. This driver from Porerua, on her way to Newtown, was one of the first in the queue.
I think I started the line. Everyone's pretty much all over the road, and I was there for 5 minutes and the line started. So it wasn't long at all. I expected a good half an hour wait.
However, she got caught out by the site's card-only setup.
I didn't bring a card, but this lovely lady's going to help pay for it. I'm going to give it back to her in cash.
Waitomo is promising $1.86 for 91, $1.99 for 95 and $1.16 for diesel for the next 2 days. And the Caltex just up the road matching it for now. Upper Hutt woman Rachel Goff didn't have to pay that today, though. She won the company's $1,000 free fuel competition. She says the win will free up some cash just in time for school holidays next week.
My daughter wants to go out and do a few things. She's into retail therapy, so she wants to have a play date with a friend, so we're going to possibly stay the night in a hotel and just do some girly stuff.
The extra money also a welcome relief for her partner, who was diagnosed with cancer exactly 1 year ago.
So he was really looking forward to coming out today to be a part of this when we found out yesterday, but unfortunately he's a bit unwell to come out, so he's a bit disappointed, but I managed to scrape in a friend to be a part of it instead.
Waitomo's managing director Jimmy Ormsby says they kept an eye on the Wellington market for some time before committing, opening a site in Upper Hutt 6 weeks ago and today in Thorndon.
12 months ago we made the decision to enter the Wellington region, and also we've got plans in place for Christchurch. So yeah, 20 to 30 cents a litre difference was the impetus for us to enter Wellington.
But out of Waitomo's 60-odd locations, Mr Ormsby says getting this site ready had its uniquely Wellington problems.
It was reclaimed land, so there were some contaminants like asbestos and the like that we had to deal with when we dug up and put our tanks in the ground. The water table's quite high here, so there was water to deal with and manage that, so they're dewatering. There's traffic here because there's a cyclist lane just next door, so we had to manage that as well.
The Commerce Commission is currently investigating why prices can be so different across the country. The Minister of Commerce and Consumer Affairs, Chris Farfoy, says the company, which keeps its prices down by having no staff on site, no store and other overheads, will bring a welcome competition to the market.
We do think that there are some issues to be looked at to make sure that Kiwis are paying a fair price at the pump. Even today's experience would suggest that they could have been getting a better deal before some competition came along. So we're really looking forward to seeing the findings from that, and the final findings will come out in December this year. And I think we'll be able to have a really clear picture of what exactly is happening around costs that consumers are paying at the pump.
Meanwhile, motorists who spotted the opening on Facebook had started to line up before the official opening at midday. For Checkpoint, Harry Locke.
That's pretty much all we've got time for tonight, but before we go, on the price per box for planting trees, Gordon says 25 years ago we got $18 a box of 100 trees, and that was considered well paid. So given 25 years of inflation, how does $30 compare per 100? Someone can do the maths for me. That's it for tonight. Check out all our stories online. Back tomorrow.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The government wants to change the law so that victims in sexual violence cases may not have to appear in a courtroom at all. A Gisborne forestry contractor says it's taken almost 3 months to have visa applications approved for migrant workers vital to the industry. Primary and intermediate school principals have hand-delivered letters urging the Education Ministry to make them a better pay offer. And a state-run newspaper in China has called for a zero-tolerance approach to protesters in Hong Kong after pro-democracy demonstrators stormed the territory's parliament and ransacked the building. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather will be at 7 o'clock.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
The heat is really high up everywhere in the world, not only in Europe. There is a very strong call that based on the current science, current data, we need to act very quickly.
Lately with me, Karen Hayes, your late night eye on the latest headlines and the people who are making them.
Rugby players smell